Раз, 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 два, три, раз, два, три. Раз, два, три, раз, два, три. Раз, два, три. Раз, два.
Раз. То же самое комментирую.
Раз.
Раз.
Hello, everyone. And one, hello. All right. All right. Once again, you're welcome and good afternoon to you all. So we are now in the second, the first round, the first round table. Hello. Hello.
Maybe we can
For
start
now.
without
Yeah,
mic.
let's start without it.
Слушай, они начали без микрофона. Выключили микрофон.
Who is an expert on interaction with universities in the African region? Name of the participant. So you welcome. I'm going to start that. State square for those who are online and even offline. So this is how for us all to interact. All right, have those who are the topics sent to us. Those who come from Africa. We have them here. And we have those who are online also as well. We'll be checking with those who are online. If they are online, we'll call the name, then they present. Each speaker has only 4 minutes to 5 minutes maximum. So when it is 4 minutes, I'm going to interject. I'm sorry if I do that. We have to stop there in order for us to manage the time. So I'll interject, then we'll stop there, then we'll move to another speaker. So let's do this, one online, one offline. And after that, we're going to have an open, like kind of a discussion. So this discussion, we have those who have questions, maybe from online, we have our colleagues who are collecting questions from online, or if someone has something to add, it could be a contribution. We will check. If we have time, we'll read out the contribution out. If we have time, we will give you 2 or 3 minutes to also contribute in case you've not submitted your topic yet. But according to what we have, we're going to work with the topics we have submitted with us already and with those who are online and offline. So thank you. I'll give the baton. I'll return it to Miss Natalia or Prof. Natalia Ivanova. Thank you.
Okay, so what about, good sound. Hello, everyone. Nice to meet you here. So many beautiful, friendly faces in Moscow. So today we speak about stereotypes, and of course, we are expecting for your impressions and for your experience after meeting Moscow, after meeting Russia. Maybe it's not for the first time. If it is for the first time, your impressions are very valuable for us because even those they shape that opinion and they broke those stereotypes. So when we speak about stereotype in cooperation and collaboration of different nations, that also is on the agenda. But and when we think about the stereotype, we also always think that it is something not a good, not it contains some false information. Yeah, it always shows us that there are some risks for misunderstanding, right? But on the other hand, when there are stereotypes on the agenda of different countries, maybe that means that we have some information and we know something about each other, maybe it's not so bad. That means that we exchange news, that some people come to Russia and Russians come to African countries, because those stereotypes couldn't appear if no one created them. Do you understand the idea? So maybe the things that we should do is to substitute the false information with right information. And it's good when we have stereotypes. It's a problem when some countries are cancelled, when we don't know anything, and when we should build it from zero. So I would like to introduce a first speaker, and we're expecting nice and informative reports. And the most valuable part will be our discussion, because I know that some of you have prepared questions to our experts, and that discussion part will help us to break those stereotypes and create some new, true knowledge that we could transmit as journalists and as scientists. So the first expert is, so also you may see in our program the areas of discussion. I won't repeat them. So the first speaker is Daria Kurenitsa. Sorry, English, very difficult always to read. So she is a really famous expert on African studies. She's from Institute for African Studies of the Russian Academy of Sciences, and the title of her report is Russia and South Africa. Who do we see? How do we see each other? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I hope I'm not doubled. So I'm very happy to be invited to such wonderful conference, and I'm very happy to represent my institution. So the Institute for African Studies is the specific institution which specializes in history, politics, economics, international relations with African countries. So I would be here speaking today about how two countries, Russia and South Africa, they see each other. Being a researcher in South African studies, oh my God. Students, what they know about Russia, what they know about the Soviet Union, for example, and what Russian students know about South Africa. So in my survey, more than 200 students took part, and unfortunately, due to COVID-19 and bureaucratic restrictions, I was not able to conduct the same survey in South Africa, but I hope I will continue my research here. So with South African side, I was able to receive some answers and to have deep interviews with them in South Africa. So to understand how we see each other, there were a special questionnaire. And the questions there were about the current events. So one of the questions was, what do you know about the contemporary relations between Russia and South Africa? And so here I'm presenting the answers mostly from the Russian side. So that is interesting for South Africans or the people who are coming from the Southern Africa to see what Russian students know about them. So the most popular answer was 39% that students were afraid to answer questions connected with Africa because they said that I don't know anything. But at the same time, 30% of them indicated BRICS in different variations, which demonstrates, of course, the real result of active work of the Russian media and the foreign media. But on the other hand, to say something more specific about South Africa except BRICS was not possible. Also, one of the questions which was in this Google form was, which prominent South Africans can you name? And here we can see very interesting questions. The majority of respondents, 52%, managed to answer this question, and they named the first president of Democratic South Africa, Nelson Mandela, known as Madiba, which is likely to demonstrate, of course, his honor and recognition in his work in the fight against apartheid. In addition to him, there were other personalities named by Russian students, as, for example, the businessman Elon Musk, the actress Charlize Theron, also a very popular music group in Russia known Die Antwoord, which some Russian students write in English, so pronouncing it in English. Meanwhile, others were also the current and historical figures from South Africa. For example, the former president of South Africa, Jacob Zuma, the first South African astronaut, Mark Shuttleworth, the first surgeon who conducted a successful heart operation, and etc., etc. But despite these positive answers, 27% of respondents could not give any answer. So they just wrote space, point, or just stick. But from the other side, what famous Russians could you name was asked to South Africans, and it was very interesting to hear what personalities they named. Of course, more from them were from the history, as for example Stalin, Trotsky, Lenin, Peter the Great, but others were current leaders as Vladimir Putin, and which is surprising that there were also some Russian sportsmen as Habib Nurmagomedov, Maria Sharapova, and Russian composer Tchaikovsky. So to compare these answers, we can see what names, what famous figures were named by two sides. And it is interesting to think how maybe it could be changed in some fact, because even though students were quite positive and they were giving answers, there were a lot of students who were even afraid to take part in the survey, because they said, if I see the questionnaire about Africa, I'm afraid that I will just write nothing, because I don't know nothing. So to sum up, this is the practical example of how the students see each other. And I think I should continue my research to questionnaire more South Africans, because to make it more comparable. And if you have any question, maybe I would be happy to answer them, maybe about the research or the results. So I think I'll stop here.
Thank you very much. All the questions will be asked after the all reports. And if you have some questions, you may put them down. We will return to our speaker. Thank you very much for your research, for your presentation. Yeah, so we're very quickly with other.
Greetings, dear ladies and gentlemen. Welcome once again to Rudan University, named after great African hero, Patrice Lumumba. Let's move on to our next presenter from Côte d'Ivoire, Mr. Zobo Maxime. I believe he's present here.
So
Please.
we should remember it's going to be in French, and you need to use your.
Oui.
Je peux aller? Oui, je vais parler en français.
It's always a pleasure to listen to this language. It's so beautiful. Thank you very much.
Je voudrais tout d'abord remercier les organisateurs de ce forum qui nous permet, nous, en tant qu'Ivoiriens, de participer à cette assemblée de haut niveau. Je voudrais surtout profiter de ce moment pour parler de ce qui nous concerne au niveau de notre sujet concernant les objectifs du développement durable en tant que journaliste. Les objectifs du développement durable nous permettent d'identifier en tant que journalistes les principaux domaines sur lesquels nous devons travailler pour améliorer les conditions de vie des populations de nos pays. Ces objectifs, faut-il le rappeler, il y en a 17 pour sauver le monde. Ils répondent aux défis liés à la pauvreté, aux inégalités, au climat, à la dégradation de l'environnement, à la prospérité, à la paix, à la justice. Mais le point 16 de ces objectifs reconnaît non seulement l'importance d'obtenir les informations nécessaires pour parvenir à un développement durable, mais il prône également la protection des personnes qui produisent ces informations et encourage et prend en compte les défis auxquels ils sont confrontés. Le personnel des médias, en particulier journalistes, recherche constamment les informations, les analyse et les diffuse. Grâce à leur travail, nous pouvons avoir les informations pour superviser les atteintes des objectifs de développement. C'est dans ce cadre-là que je voulais profiter de ce forum pour dire qu'au niveau de nous qui sommes de l'Afrique de l'Ouest, particulièrement de la Côte d'Ivoire, nous voulons vraiment inviter la Russie à pénétrer surtout notre région, parce que quand je prends les propos, je prends en compte les propos des différents intervenants ce matin, lorsque j'ai réactualisé mon papier, j'ai pris l'intervention en compte des différents intervenants pour dire que dans leurs propos, vous savez, ce qui a été pris en compte, c'est surtout au niveau des anglophones qui sont privilégiés. Alors nous, au niveau de l'Afrique de l'Ouest, nous voudrons qu'il y ait une vraiment pénétration de la Russie pour que, au niveau surtout de la langue, qu'on ouvre des instituts de formation en russe, des instituts de formation. Aujourd'hui, vous savez que notre pays, il y a l'Inde qui pénètre aujourd'hui l'Afrique de l'Ouest avec des instituts. Donc, dans la dynamique de l'intensification de la coopération qui est entreprise aujourd'hui par la Russie au niveau de l'Afrique, nous voudrions que l'élément fondamental qui est la langue, qui est un élément vraiment déterminant de l'identité culturelle, soit pris en compte pour que les instituts de formation s'ouvrent vers nous et que de plus en plus d'Ivoiriens ou d'Africains apprennent le russe et que ici, comme c'est le cas ici, que nous venons et que nous échangions, vous voyez, en russe. Nous voudrions aussi profiter pour dire aussi que dans le cadre des objectifs de développement dont nous devons prendre une part active, il faut aussi la formation. La formation des journalistes, la formation de tous ceux qui analysent et qui diffusent les informations. Et dans ce cadre-là aussi, je voulais profiter de ce moment pour saluer l'initiative qui a été prise en octobre 2022 par la Russie, en faisant venir des Africains ici pour des échanges et des partages multiformes dans le cadre de la communication et du traitement de l'information. Mais là encore, je voudrais aussi profiter pour dire que nous, les Ivoiriens, surtout nous qui sommes de l'Afrique de l'Ouest, on a été encore ignorés. Alors donc, c'est pourquoi je voudrais vraiment axer mon intervention sur
Second speaker will be also a journalist. Our colleague will be online. That's Likan Atufondurin. Sorry, very difficult for Russian person to pronounce names. A journalist, executive director of Nigeria's leading media mentoring and coaching organization, Media Career Development Network, and also a columnist for the nation newspapers, different nations newspapers, right? Or the one?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a pleasure to introduce our colleague.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Lekan Otufoduni. If you are online, I think you're online. Kindly just turn on your mic. We're with you. Just turn on your mic.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, so good morning from here in Nigeria. I want to thank the organizers for this invitation. My brief is to speak about how Russia is perceived in the Nigerian media. Just like any other country, the local media organizations report international news. We report about issues, we talk about major development, and Russia has also been in the news. Expectedly, what has dominated reporting about Russia in the Nigerian media in recent times has been the war with Ukraine. And for this presentation, what I did was to go through most of the newspapers, some of them, and what you find are headlines talking about things that are going back there. So you have issues like mutiny in Russia. You talk about CIA denies U.S. involvement in Wagner's group rebellion. You have stories like Russia running out of weapons can be defeated by Ukraine. This is a UK report. You have Ukraine war, West behaving like bandits, says Russia. So you begin to have all these kind of reports. But what had become very apparent is that Russia is portrayed as the aggressor in this war. It's seen as trying to sort of bully Ukraine into submission and refusing to listen to intervention from Africa, from EU. So you have all this kind of report. Also, in the early days of the war, we had reports about the impact of the war on Nigerian students and some other Africans who had to leave. And there were reports about how some of them were discriminated against and things like that. So that's the kind of report that you have all through the media in recent times. In fact, it's as if nothing else is happening in Russia, it's about war. Whereas, I mean, for those of us who go online, you see that life is going on as if nothing's happening in some parts of Russia, in most parts of the Russia. So again, what has dominated the report, it's about the war, the war, the war. And there are people who think that this framing is negative. Yes, there is war, but there are probably other things that are happening. But what I think is the problem sometimes is that the Nigerian media doesn't have access to the official response from Russia. Even for the reports that we use, we quote Western media organizations or Al Jazeera, who, for whatever reason, may report from their own perspective. So it's important that, as much as possible, we there must be a way to facilitate responses from Russia, so that the Nigerian journalists, for example, can have a first-hand information about what is happening. They can hear from the officials, because this morning I spoke to a Nigerian journalist. I said I'm going to be speaking I'm going to be speaking, and he says that Russia is a closed country. You hardly hear anything from them. So for me, what this has shown is that there is need for exchange of information. It's important that Russia open up in terms of information. It has to tell its own side of the story as much as possible when we want information. If this doesn't happen, then we may just be reporting what we know, and we may not be getting the true picture. So in summary, that's what I want to say, that for now, the framing in the Nigerian media is about Russia being the oppressive government, frustrating efforts to mediate peace, which I don't think is good, and which may not be the total picture. But it's what information that we have that the media is reporting. I want to stop at that, because essentially that's the focus of my invitation. That's what I've been able to perceive from the media reports that I have seen. Even on TV, you still have what is reported about every day, what's happening. And you see the Nigerian media struggling to find a voice from Russia. Once in a while, they get the press agency's report, but sometimes it may just not be enough. So thank you once again for this opportunity. But like I've said, my own suggestion is that we need more information about what is happening back in Russia, so that we can report exactly what is happening and give the world a true picture about what Russia agenda is in Nigeria or in some other parts of Africa. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lekan Otufoduni. And I guess after this particular, at the end of the round table discussion, there will be some questions and follow-up questions from us. And there will be questions from the audience also as well. We appreciate if you can stay with us so we can finish at that level. Thank you once again. The next speaker is one of our participants here, Francis Kasanje Lungu from Zambia. The role of Russian African media in changing the narrative on existing relations, economic
Российско-африканской нити, экономика, политика,
Francis Kasanje.
технологии и наука. На каком языке ты будешь говорить? На английском или на французском?
Thank you so very much for the opportunity to address issues that are pertaining to the topic under the second roundtable, which is Russia-Africa view from the outside, and resisting established stereotypes and adopting objective reality. Looking at what we have been experiencing from the African part, the Southern Africa in general, is that the narrative that we have usually been seeing, or indeed receiving from the mass media has been peddled mostly by the Western media. I think it's in line with what is it Nikhil Tafuduli, the previous speaker, has really emphasized, and is the correct perception when you look at the existing relations between Russia and Africa. Mainly, the explanation is peddled or being done by the Western media. And this creates a huge gap in terms of getting the correct information and the correct narrative. And it calls for enhanced collaboration between Russia and Africa. And looking at what was submitted earlier by one of the speakers from the Russia Union of Journalism, I think the cooperation between Russia and Africa really needs to be deepened, because the story between the bilateral relations is being told by people who are not part of us, if I may put it that way. And we need really to collaborate so that we enhance this exchange of information, and we start getting our own information and speaking into our own issues in the manner that we need to do, and change the narrative, and the stereotyping that we've been experiencing. From the African point of view, as a media or a media practitioner, I feel that we really need to collaborate in all the areas of information pertaining our two regions. That is in economic diplomacy, even politics, and also science and technology. I think it's an area that we really need to be assisted, like from the African point of view. I think the media lacks modern technological equipment, and also just the information that we can use to change the narrative, and just tell the African story as well as the Russian story in a very objective way. Thank you so very much.
Thank you very much, Francis. Good to see you here, all the way from Zambia. Now we want to give the floor to Maria Shpak, master's student from Lomonosov State University and Institute of World Economic and International Relations. The topic is digital dimensions of Russian-African educational cooperation, achievements, challenges, and prospects. Maria, please.
Okay, yeah. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. Yeah, I think it's okay. So thank you very much for this opportunity to participate in such a wonderful event. And today I'd like to share with you my recent research on the digital dimension of Russian-African educational cooperation. Nowadays, our objective reality proves that the most convenient, flexible, and interactive platform for communication is the digital space. Websites, online resources, social media platforms proved to be efficient ways of communication, and they allow us to achieve much greater success than traditional media channels. And within the current geopolitical context, Russian and African relations in the field of education are the subject of particular interest. Nowadays, more than 34,000 African students are enrolled in Russian universities, and Russian universities, business, and state actors are actively involved in the process of recruiting African students to study in Russia. And among the solutions implemented by the Russian government, I'd like to highlight the Russian African Network University, which is a project established in August of 2021 on the initiative of the Russian Ministry of Education and Science. And currently it includes more than 40 universities all around the Russian Federation, which are experienced in educational cooperation with African countries. The goal of this project was to create a common educational and scientific environment and to incentivize the intercultural dialogue between Russian and African countries. To provide the efficient functioning of this university, it was planned to develop its own digital educational platform. And consequently, a website of the university was created and developed, and it contained all the up-to-date information on its activities.
Вся современная информация.
However, the website as a digital solution has a number of important weaknesses, such as problems with the operation of the interface, translation mistakes, and lack of relevant information. This year, in April, if I'm not mistaken, I reported on the Russian African Educational Cooperation for the Russian International Affairs Council. And among other aspects, achievements and challenges, I mentioned the problems with the website of the Russian African Network University. And now, while I was preparing for our meeting today, while I was preparing my report, I tried to visit the site of Russian African Network University, and it is no longer available. Maybe, well, of course, I don't think that it is because of my publication. I rather consider it as a coincidence. So perhaps someone responsible for this project just also noticed the imperfections of this resource and sent it for revision and adjustment. However, nowadays, this institution left without a digital representation. I'm sorry, but such a huge project involving a lot of Russian universities and the organizations in Africa needs a quality channel of media representation in digital space. Moreover, it needs not only a functioning website, but also a full-fledged digital educational platform to provide informational support for the applicants from African countries. And of course, this is not the first experience of cooperation between Russian and African universities. For example, the Ruden University, which is kindly hosting us today, is the most active and I think the most successful Russian institution in this area. However, the work of Russian universities with African students could be even more effective if Russian African educational cooperation had a quality representation in the digital space. And here are some measures that I consider necessary and, well, urgent. Greater attention should be paid to the digital internationalization of the internet portals of Russian universities and educational platforms. Our colleagues from the Russian International Affairs Council assessed the quality of this internationalization of Russian universities' websites or portals and concluded that less than 15% of Russian universities which work with foreign students contain all the necessary information on their English websites. So these should be corrected and improved because the websites of the universities accepting foreign students should have correct translations into English and other popular languages and contain all the necessary information for potential applicants. New digital platforms and resources need to be developed, and the existing ones, such as website of the Russian African Network University, should be fine-tuned and improved in order to facilitate communication between students from Russia and Africa. And of course, it is increasingly important for Russia to enable informal communication with professional communities in African countries and to engage in dialogue with the journalist communities, with professional communities, and to incentivize the track to diplomacy contacts between Russia and African continent in order to resist existing stereotypes and to create a positive image of Russia in African countries and vice versa. And finally, I'd like to highlight that it is also important to cover activities in the sphere of educational cooperation in the Russian and international media, because high quality representation of joint Russian and African educational initiatives in the media can raise awareness in African countries about the educational opportunities in Russia.
Thank you, Maria. It's time.
Okay.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to see young researchers who are making true researchers, not speaking just about cooperation and some entities, but doing on the place what they can. Thank you very much. So the following speaker is Adama Adamu, an online guy. And we see he's a senior lecturer and, that's a lady, a senior lecturer and head of Department of Mass Communications, Ahmadu Bello University from Nigeria. So I think our speaker will, so my colleagues say she's not available, unfortunately. So who will be the next speaker?
So
Sorry.
While we wait for her to reconnect, we will call Tanyaradzwa, right? Tanyaradzwa Diana Ruski from Zimbabwe. Focus point, countering disinformation and fake news. Countering disinformation and fake news. Are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay, so you've got 4 to 5 minutes maximum. And if it is below that, it's okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. I'm happy to be here, to be one of the participants. My focus point is countering disinformation and fake news. I'm sure we all understand the role of journalists is to communicate, to bridge the gap between government and the society. Disinformation refers to deliberately sharing that is known to be false with the intention of deceiving people. The spread of false news and information, largely through digital platforms, has become an overwhelming global crisis. The phenomenon of false news and information that many today call fake news arises from the dissemination of misinformation and disinformation by individuals or organized groups seeking to advance some agendas. I will give an example from my country where during COVID-19 pandemic, disinformation also resulted in the sharing and spreading of conspiracy theories around COVID-19 in threats to right to life and the right to health, public disorder. In other instances, generally derailed the positive impact of COVID-19 containment measures. What I'm trying to say is that during COVID-19, because of the rise of fake news and disinformation, people, some didn't want to be vaccinated because of the information they were getting on social media and other platforms. So I believe what needs to be done as a measure, or what needs to be done to counter disinformation and fake news, citizens should be equipped with knowledge of fact checking and how to use them to verify information before sharing it. I also believe governments need to be more proactive in promoting access to information as a counter to the spread of information. And I also believe this platform, these opportunities will broaden our views as journalists and be able to be equipped to report better and to counter disinformation. And lastly, I would say, when people ask me what is the key to get massive collaborations across the finish line, I would say the people, the diversity of perspectives, skills, languages, and geographies is the team, and the sense that we are all united by something bigger than us. I thank you.
Thank you very much for your bright speech, and hope all our colleagues here inspired to write good articles on the follow-up of what you've just said. Now, let's move on to the next speaker, and we'll address your points at the end of our roundtable today. Please, Mr. Ebeme Chris Marliam. We are talking on the side of a military person today with the topic of media of Republic of Congo in the context of information threats.
Здравствуйте, уважаемые участники и журналисты. Я сначала хочу вам напомнить, что сегодня русскоязычный научный источник тема медиа и журналистики в странах Африки недостаточно. Вам необходимо написать много статей для студентов, которые обучаются в России.
diplomacy as a means of agenda setting in Russia. No, she isn't with us. It's a pity.
Are you ready or?
Yeah, I'm ready.
So 3 to 4 minutes, please.
Sorry? All right, good afternoon. My name is Timo Shihepo from Namibia. I'm a journalist there. Coming here, I had an idea of what I wanted to say, but listening to the speakers, I thought it's necessary that I incorporate what the speakers had said into what I'm going to say now. For example, if we start with what the Vice Director of International Affairs, Lavisa Eframova, said. She was speaking about Sem Nujoma and the Namibian relations. Briefly, if I can just talk about that, Namibia and Russia have strong relations back dating when our country was being colonized, and our fighters were being trained in the Soviet Union. So that relationship has built, has continued till today in terms of international relations. However, if we trickle down to the issue of then the issue of the topic at hand, which is Russia-Africa view from outside. In terms of the media in Namibia, the local media is balanced. They look on both issues, and they are mostly aligning to Russia, but the international media, which is broadcast via satellite TV, which is CNN and BBC, they are always pressuring that Russia is a bad country. Unfortunately, or fortunately for us, we know our history, and that's really good. It's also a pity that Mr. Timo Shafir from the Union of Russia Union of Journalists is not here, because I think it would have been nice to hear what I wanted to say, because I am also a executive member of the Media Professional Union in Namibia, and it would be really nice if we were to have a discussion to see how we can collaborate together as journalists in Russia and in Namibia to really exchange ideas in terms of how we portray Russia's work in Namibia and Namibian information to Russia. As I've said also that we have a lot of students here, or not said before, but we have a lot of students here in Russia. Our Minister of Health currently, Mr. Kalumbi Shangula, is also a student from Russia here. So in terms of international relations, we are really on par, but in terms of collaboration between the media, journalists in Namibia and Russia, there is a gap there. And I think it could really help to address the stereotypes. Thank you.
So we're ready to invite to speak Senior Lecturer and Head of Department of Mass Communications, Ahmadu Bello University from Nigeria, Adama Adamu.
Hello, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. We can hear you. Thank you very much for joining us.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Can you hear me, please?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, okay.
You can start now, please.
Oh, okay, okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I am grateful to be in this event. My name is Adama Ademo. I'm from Nigeria, Ahmadu Bello University, Zaria in Nigeria. My focus of discourse here is regarding disinformation and fake news, and how to create a robust communication strategy that will be able to help in the Africa-Russia ties. You know, in Africa, Russian media outlets have not been really visible in the sense of the populace getting more information from the Russian side. So what we largely have here is usually from the European Western-centric perspective. Hello, am I being heard?
Yes, we can hear you. And
Okay. As I was saying,
you can turn on your camera too, if possible.
okay. Can you see? The network is very poor here. I've been struggling with it.
All right, but we can hear you loud and clear.
Oh, okay.
And
so, like I was saying,
yes. Sorry, we appreciate if you can deliver it in the next 4 minutes maximum. We'll appreciate that, please.
Okay. Okay.
All right. Thanks.
So what I was saying is regarding the issue of disinformation and fake news that get harbored here much. And this is because the Russian media or the Russian perspective is largely not as robust as it should be, especially in Africa and then in the western part of Africa where I reside, Nigeria. So this is why we are trying to propose that there should be a more robust communication strategy that would be able to give news and information from the Russian perspective, rather than Africa being bombarded more with Western media, which is largely controlled by America and Britain. So how do we do this? The only way we'll be able to dispel this information from the perspective of getting more news from the Russian side. When you have much more media channels, the tendency that much news, much opinion from the Russian side will trickle more into Africa than just allowing Western media, such as the BBC, the Voice of America, and France, controlling the media space of Africa. So our proposition here is that when Russia tries to have more robust media outlets that could more robust media outlets that could communicate to Africans, and this can be done largely through using their languages. So the African languages, I mean the ones that are more pronounced, the ones that have covered more countries, can be utilized by Russia. For example, there was a presenter in the morning that talked about research in the Kiswahili language, which is, yes, it's very true. One of the things that the British media is using is by using languages like Kiswahili, and then here in West Africa, like using the Hausa language. In West Africa here, we have so many Hausa speaking natives who are equally scattered across the globe. So when you have media organizations that will be able to transmit news and information more in this indigenous languages, just like the BBC is doing. I can give you the example of BBC. BBC has BBC Hausa Radio. The Voice of America has Voice of America Hausa Radio. Radio France has the Hausa section. The German media, that is Radio Veteran and Deutsche Welle, also transmits in Hausa. And then of recent, the TRT opened by the Turkish government equally has a radio section that transmits in the Hausa language. This using of language has helped a lot, or is helping a lot in dispelling much of the disinformation. And then at the same time, it's equally helping a lot in the Western media propagating their own agenda, their own propaganda, and which is largely against Russia. So there is the need for Russia, in order to strengthen its ties with the African continent, to explore the possibility of using indigenous language to transmit their messages via the Russian media outlets that can reach across the globe. And this can be done whether with the conventional media or with the social media. Here in Africa and here in Nigeria, mostly the populace are still in tune with radio messages. So radio is a very good medium of communicating. Radio has gone online, so it goes into the nook and cranny of the continent or of the nation.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you very much.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Adam Adamu. There will be question and answer and kind of discussion after the presentations of the others. So we appreciate your time from morning, and we'll still appreciate if you can still stay with us. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we are coming to our final speaker.
Donc, maintenant, nous passons à l'intervention, à la dernière intervention.
Sorry, who's speaking? Okay. What? So please, the writer and political researcher from Egypt, Rania Abo El Khair, with the presentation on media cooperation between Russia and Africa. Thank you very much.
At the first of all, I want to thank all the organizers of this forum. My name is Rania Abul Khair. I'm the Secretary General of the Global Forum of the Future Studies. My paper today is talking about Russian-African media cooperation, reality, and the future. The Russian-African reapportionment emerged in the international scene in the mid of 2000s. Specifically in 2005, when the Russian President Vladimir Putin visited Egypt. Since in the beginning of the 1990s, when the Soviet Union dissolved, Russia lost interest in Africa. And in 1992, Moscow closed 9 embassies and 4 consulates, and large number of cultural centers in Africa. For 10 years, Russian leaders never visited Africa, situation that remains unchanged until Russia redirected its vision towards the African states. Although Russia's relation with its African partners, which were strengthened in 1950s and 1960s, have not persevered. Russia's long absence impacted the level of relation between the two sides for more than a decade. With the regaining of the power and the international status, Russia strove to restore its relation with many former partners and find new partners to strengthen its role in international scene. The African states were the forefront of such partner out of two important dimensions that we are the gate of Russia's return to its position. First of which was the Russian role in supporting the independence of many African states. Second is Russian have never had any colonies in Africa, and facts explicitly confirmed by Sergei Lavrov, the Russian Minister of Foreign Affairs, in June 2019 during the shareholder of meeting of African Export-Import Bank in Moscow. He said, "We have always been friends with African states. Our relation evolved based of the principles of equality, mutual respect, and concentration of each other's. And interest of Russia has never been completed in plundering African resources and always abused all formers apartheid. Instead, Russia provides deserved assistance to the African their struggle against the colonialism. Russia continues to assist these nations and develop their economy even after they gained independence. In this spirit, it was a coincidence that Russian-African relations have remarkably developed over the past period. That development was highlighted in the first Russia-African summit held on October 24, 2019 in Sochi. And its statement, which is in two significant items, 38 and 43, shed light on the importance of promoting joint cooperation in media. The statement particularly highlighted the following. I will simplify it by two items only: facilitating cooperation in joint research projects, greater cooperation among universities and major research centers of the Russian Federation and African states, organizing scientific conferences and seminars, and encouraging further exchange, joint training, and cooperation in the academic field, as well as in culture, education, technology, sports, healthcare, tourism, and mass media. Second is extending cooperation in the information field, including the strengthening ties among national media outlets, information sharing, training to refreshment training of journalists, and to contacts between line ministers and agencies, strengthens the legal and contractor framework for cooperation in communication and mass media also, promoting mutual participation of mass media bodies in Russian Federation and African states in national digital and cable broadcasting network. And also facilitating the opening of Russian and African mass media hubs in the representative territories of African states and also Russian Federation. Then, accordingly, thanks to the summit, Russian-African cooperation that have remarkably developed, confirmed by several indicators, the most prominent of which as follows. Firstly, the role of Russian channels as Russian Today, Supersonic in many African states have been growing It was reported by the American, the New York Times, that after the infections of some French media outlets, many Africans has increasingly turned to Russian resources to obtain information inter alia on the situation of Ukraine. The Russian resource refer particularly to Subtonic and RT. Then the New York Times also reported that after the defuncture of RT in French and the Francophone Russian media department has been working more actively in Africa. So there is another also points, but well,
thank you, please.
At the end of
there's no time.
Okay.
Because we need to give time for the question and answer and the discussion. Already now we have only 9 minutes to finish this roundtable, and we still have another speaker. We
Okay.
appreciate if you can.
Okay,
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. The final person on this roundtable is Benzatat Mohammed Sadiq, overcoming Western stereotypes in building Russian-African relations. You've got 4 minutes, please. 4 minutes, please.
Bonjour tout le monde. Je me permets d'exprimer au début toute ma gratitude pour l'accueil chaleureux de la Fédération russe, de la ville de Moscou et de la prestigieuse Université de Russie afin de participer à ce forum international sur les relations Russie-Afrique. À vrai dire, je ne vais pas répéter ce que les confrères ont dit. Donc, je ne vais pas citer ou je ne vais pas expliquer.
Received my education in the area of geopolitics and international relations. And believe me, there have been a lot of prejudice and stereotypes regarding collaboration of Africa and Russia, regarding the face and what we thought about each other. These are the cliches which go from generation to generation as a legacy. Unfortunately, we can state there are two major issues having an impact on stereotypes, and they're emerging. On the one hand side is authoritarian. Very often, Russia is seen as a dominating state, starting from Tsarism to communism. All these characteristics go from a generation to other as a cliche, which is absolutely not like this. Also, there is a vision and a stereotype of a monocultural nature of Africa. Many people think of Africa is something very not much alike. And in the morning today, we've discussed it already. What do we do to achieve mutual respect? How can we transfer and share this diversity, national and as well as cultural, between Russia and Africa? And Russia, I should say, has done it the right way and has taken the issue seriously, creating bilateral and multilateral relationship with the African continent. Let me not take too much time from you. I would like to recommend something to you. It's more like an academic point of view. Interdisciplinary approach is really of paramount importance. And I would like, for instance, in Algeria, to see Russian scientists who could write about the Russian politics in Algerian media. And also would like them to participate in the forums launched by Algerian universities. Any investigator from Africa, from Algeria, or Tunisia, or whatever, Namibia, or from any other country, it is good that they could present the right vision, explaining how things are really going on in their countries. For instance, President of Algeria visited the Russian Federation quite recently, and he was discussing the issue of entering BRICS. But this is not the problem. But what we hear news from different media, there is a cliche which is dictated also by the Western mass media. And that is that Algeria's entering BRICS will not be fruitful, is the stereotype. As if they want this, to see that Russia will be a colonizer country for us and for Africa as it is, but it would be great if we knew what geopolitical circumstances are the real ones existing here. And I would like to thank you once again. I hope I haven't taken too much time from you. And thank you so very much for your kind attention.
Please, your surname, please. Adeta, we forgot to, we omitted your name in the list. Maybe because it wasn't submitted. So he'll be presenting on how media in Africa and Russia frame international sanctions. So you've got just 3 minutes, please. Just summary, because we need to go for break now.
All right, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak in this conference. A few months back, my friend and a colleague represented at Moscow State University on a topic that talks about media and media relation in Africa and Russia. But today I'll be talking about the topic on how media in Africa and Russia frame international sanctions. I'll be particularly zeroing on Zimbabwe and then Russia. We know in Africa, Zimbabwe is under a serious international sanctions since 2001, when the government of Zimbabwe then began a land reform that was taking lands from white minority and then giving it to some blacks in Zimbabwe. So since then, Zimbabwe has been under serious sanctions, and it continues to today. And then currently in Russia, since 2014, when the issue of Crimea and then other issues began, Russia has also begun to face serious international sanction. But in this situation, institutions like this, what role do media play in ensuring that citizens of a particular country have stabilized attention about sanctions in those countries? So I am looking at how media in Zimbabwe particularly and how media in Russia frame international sanction. So for this ongoing study, I selected headlines from 5 newspapers in Zimbabwe, which include the Herald, New Zimbabwe, Daily News, the Sunday News, and then Daily Mail. Now, these headlines are selected from October 2021 till July 2023, which covers a wide margin of time where we can actually pick issues of sanctions in this country. And then for Russia, I select headlines from Russia Today, from the Moscow Times, from Spook News, from February 2022, when this current Ukraine-Russia war began, which brings Russia to the limelight of many countries in Africa, because many countries in Africa do not even know more about Russia until the Russia-Ukraine war. So I select the headlines from February 2022 to July 2023 on sanctions in Russia. So now I use, academically, I use framing theory and then agenda setting theory to analyze these headlines to see what frame are these media using to present sanction and what agenda are they pushing to the locals who listen to or who read this news in the media. Now, for some of us who may not be familiar with framing and agenda, let me just give a brief intro into framing and agenda theory. Now, framing theory talks about how information is presented that shows significant way on how it influences individuals and how they interpret the particular issue. While agenda setting theory talks about what issue is the media pushing forward for the populace to have discussion about. What are they pushing to the people to discuss about? So now I analyze these headlines using positive framing, negative framing, and neutral framing, and also use positive agenda, negative agenda, and then mixed agenda to analyze each of the headlines that are selected for this ongoing study. Now, for Zimbabwe, I have selected 25 headlines from 5 different newspapers. And then for Russia, I have selected 16 headlines from 5 different newspapers. Now, let me just give a brief analysis of the summary of the analysis. Now, for instance, when I talk about positive framing talks about how media is emphasizing success, optimism, and resilience in the face of sanction. For instance, we have an headline on the 12th of June 2023 in Zimbabwe in the Herald. It says, Zim turns sanction crisis into success story. Now, this is a framing that talks about that push positive agenda to the people, meaning that under this sanction, Zimbabwe is still pushing forward and also making significant progress. Likewise, we have similar in Russia Today of July 12, 2023, that talks about top Russia lenders clock up record profit and amid Western sanctions. This talks about that despite the sanctions, Russia is still making financial progress despite the international sanctions that they have on them. Now, let's have a summary. Now, sorry, a minute, please. Now, for the headlines I selected for Russian media, now for 75% of these headlines were presented using positive frame. And then as opposed to the Zimbabwe headlines where we have 50% of them using positive frame. Now, the negative frame used in Russian headline is just 18.75, while the negative frame used in Zimbabwe headline is 43.75. This shows that Russia media presents more new headlines from positive angle and then makes people feel stabilized, even in the face of the international sanction, more than it is in Africa. Now, I think.
Thank you so much.
Okay,
Thank you
so
very
I
much.
think I have to stop here. Thank you very much for the time.
Thank you so much. Thanks for everyone. And to be honest, it's quite a positive feeling after this discussion, because all of you mentioned some stereotypes, but right here we see that you are not so much affected by them. So do we. We are not so much affected by those stereotypes, what we know about African countries. But all of you mentioned that huge problem, the domination of Western media in Africa now, and about fake news about Russia and about international politics. And maybe this is a thing to discuss now. And one idea also. Maybe those stereotypes help us to overcome those fake news, because we know everything about each other, yeah? And the stereotypes become as a basic to understand each other, and fake news don't work. What do you think about that? So let's discuss. Yeah.
So we have only 5 minutes, and this 5 minutes, I'm sorry, I may have to take only one response in this room and one response online from one of those speakers. I may direct one question to Mr. Lekan Otufoduri if he's still online. If he's not online, then if anyone, maybe Dr. Adama Adamu is online, just one between one of them, just to respond, and one here. So is Lekan Otufoduri online? If it's not, then we move on. Or Dr. Adamu. Okay. So the question is this. Be ready if I'll just pick you randomly if you're ready to just respond on that. So the question is this. Are there any instances of shared or aligned media agenda between Russian and African countries? And how does this influence public perception and diplomatic relations? Are there any instances? Oh, no, I'm sorry. This is it. In what ways can journalists from both Africa and Russia collaborate to present a more nuanced and accurate portrayal of each other's country, societies, challenges, existing stereotypes? In what ways can journalists from Russia and Africa collaborate to present a more nuanced and accurate portrayal of one another's region, and especially with the challenges facing the two sides? Okay, anyone here in the room, if you're ready? If not, then I move to the second question. And okay. So again, this is a question. In what ways can journalists from Africa and Russia, we've talked about problems here. We've been talking about challenges. And one of the reasons we're here is not to talk only about the challenges because they're obvious, but to see how we look at a way out. And this is an avenue for us to put some of these in place, to listen to and probably find a way to collaborate to do anything we can do. So we need to hear. All right. You understand the question, right? Okay, please.
Francis Lungu again from Zambia. I think the ways in which we can collaborate could be in twofold. Firstly, at individual institution, I personally, I think I've been collaborating with some of Russian journalists who are sharing articles, and we've been publishing them online in my media house back home in Zambia. So that's one way of collaborating. Secondly, I think we've made an observation to say that there is lack of media presence in terms of the Russian media on the African continent. When you look at the other international media outlets, the BBC, Al Jazeera, Xinhua of China, the Voice of America, they all have a huge presence on the African continent, but we don't see, or we haven't seen yet, any Russian media outlet with bureaus or branches or offices as it may be on the African continent. So we need this.
Oh, unfortunately, we may continue later.
Let's maybe finish
With the first question?
Yeah, to have a discussion.
We will continue with from the second round table. We'll look at the time we have. We have 15 minutes break. I think my colleague is going to give a closing remark here. And when we come back, if you have, before we start, you can share it, please. I'll call on you before we start it. Quickly make your remark on that, then we'll move to the second round.
Thanks very much, Mustafa. I think you have opened such a vast potential here, because if you look at the eyes of all the people here, they want to say something, and this format definitely needs to be upgraded so that we have a means of processing all this information. What I want to close with is we're located in a very special place. This university is a unique place in the world. And the history and legacy and the future of this school really deserve attention from media professionals, journalists, writers, etc. Because if we look at Russia-Africa relations, there is no better place to study than this university. And this university not only represents particular disciplines, but it's also integrated into a vast network of Russian universities. So it's like a window into Russia. And the topic of our roundtable today is education and communication. And those of you who know Russian language, education in Russian is образование. The key word in there is obraz, the image that we have to create together of the future that we want to see. And no better person than the journalist or the writer can do that. So the call of the closing remarks, let us all put our pens together and create this detailed image of Russia-Africa relations that have very grounded and humane roots in People's Friendship University of Patrice Lumumba. So thank you very much, all of you.
Thank you very much. We're going for a short break in 15 minutes. Then we'll be back.
It's coffee break.
We should be back at 3:30. 3:30.
It's coffee break in the room
Next
right
room.
here. Yeah.